Good evening. I hope you're doing better this evening, better than you did last evening. My name is Victor Muyakane, and this is a daily report from the home of untold stories, TV47. On a day that Kenya joins its sister nation in Africa, Malawi, in mourning their fallen Vice President Saulos Klaus Chilima and 9 staffers, on a day that the world looks on in horror as the war in Gaza continues, on a day that Kenya witnessed a unique budget, we bring you what's going on across your world. And for a glimpse of that and what else we have in store, here are the highlights. Professor Njuguna Ndung'u says the government aims at reducing reliance on foreign loans by raising revenue internally.
I receive messages every day, very many. And on this finance bill, I've received very many messages again.
Kenyans call and text their members of parliament in an unprecedented move. Some wanted their leaders not to accept the revenue-raising measures proposed by the government.
But the point I'm making is that they should stop swamping and spamming our phones. Because we are also leaders, we know what we'll do. And the issues that they raise will be in golden finance bill.
And a senior police officer was shot and killed after wounding Makadara Principal Magistrate Monica Kivuti after delivering a ruling.
One suspect entered to the courts and injured the magistrate in that particular court and the orderlies. But lucky enough, our officers who are within the courts were able to act swiftly.
All this and more tonight on the Daily Report. Well, that and so much more we have in store for you this evening, and along for this journey is, of course, Rhoda Nyamai on sign language. With that out of the way, shall we begin? And the government will slow down the uptake of external commercial debt and adopt innovative solutions as it moves to manage public debt. This, of course, pushes the percentage to 55.45. Treasury CS Njuguna Ndung'u says that the strict revenue collection measures that the government is using, or rather the strict revenue collection measures will remain as the government seeks to diversify the revenue sources and use concessional financing from partners. Hibak Said tells us more on how this government plans to tame the ballooning debt.
In the hubbub of reading the national budget and the celebrations that came after it, stood the imposing plan of how the government plans to push the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Measures it will take to raise revenue in its 3.9 trillion shilling budget.
There is increased demands for increased spending or expenditures from the government. That means that either we have to finance that through taxes or debt.
Strict guidelines were issued tightening the belt, or is it the noose, to tame the ballooning wage bill, standing at 38% of the total expenditure.
It is painful, as you can see, if it's 38.2% in terms of total budget, total outlay expenditures, is very high. But we are also moving an extra step to say we have to have the quality mix.
This as the Cabinet Secretary froze a number of state tours and trainings and announced the shift to accrual accounting system, a system meant to phase out pending bills completely.
Pending bills is a menace. On one side, those who are still holding debt on the government and have not been paid for years, as we are starting from 2005, you can imagine what it means to their suffering, what happens to their investment, and what happens to their businesses. That's why we want to say this is the end of that. We want to do this with a finality. We should appreciate that and look at history and try to live down that bad history. We want to live it down by coming to a finality.
The National Treasury aims at financing the budget through revenue collection, grants, as well as both foreign and domestic borrowing.
Mr. Speaker, to protect local assemblies and create fairness and equity in taxation, I propose an introduction of excise duty on imported, fully built motorcycle at the rate of 10% of the customs value, in addition to specific tax duty rate of Kenya shillings 12,952.83 cents per unit, whichever is higher. Mr. Speaker, participation in betting, gaming, prize competition, lotteries continues to affect socio-economic fabric of our society, given their addictive nature. Mr. Speaker, last year we raised the excise duty on these activities from 7.5% to 12.5% to discourage participation. Despite this increase, participation rate in these activities by Kenyan citizens, especially school-going children and young adults, continues to persist. To further discourage this behavior, I propose to increase the excise duty tax rates to 20%.
And so ends the reading for the budget 2024-2025. This as the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, says that there is no discrepancy between the budget that he read today of 3.9 trillion and the 4.006 trillion budget that the Appropriations and Budget Committee Chair Ndindi Nyoro had talked about. This as he says that the tax measures that have been put in place in the finance bill is essential to ensure that the revenue collected is used for development projects. Hibak Said for TV47 from Bunge.
Still on matters budget, and the government has allocated 13.4 billion shillings for the permanent hiring of approximately 46,000 teachers who were previously serving as interns. This was announced by Treasury CS Njuguna Ndung'u, who presented the 2024-25 budget estimates in Parliament early Thursday. In the estimates, the education sector has received an allocation of about 656.6 billion shillings, which is about 27.6% of the total expenditure. Out of this, 358.2 billion shillings has been set aside for the Teachers Service Commission, that is TSC. 142.3 billion shillings has been set aside for primary education, 128 billion shillings for higher education and research, as well as 30.7 billion shillings for vocational and technical education. Additionally, to improve the quality and safety of students in schools, the government has allocated 3.2 billion shillings for infrastructure in primary and secondary schools.
Mr. Speaker, the allocation of the education sector includes Kenya shillings 9.1 billion free primary education, 61.9 billion shillings for free day secondary education, Kenya shillings 30.7 billion for junior secondary school capitation, and Kenya shillings 5 billion for the examinations fee waiver. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 13.4 billion for the conversion of 46,000 junior secondary school interns to permanent and pensionable terms. Kenya shillings 1.3 billion for the training of teachers on competency-based curriculum, and Kenya shillings 360 million for the digital literacy program and ICT integration in our secondary schools.
Still on the budget, let's look at more details from this. The education sector remains the biggest beneficiary of the 2024-2025 financial budget. The total amount allocated to the education sector is 659.5 billion shillings, equivalent to 27.5% of the budget. Here are the numbers. Now, the 127 billion Kenya shillings allocated to the Health Ministry aim to, among other things, ensure a smooth running of the sector at a time when the nation awaits a shift of the 57 years existing NHIF to be replaced by the SHIF or SHIF. That is something we shall be looking at a little bit later. That's on the story on health, but have a look at this. Now, the montage we just gave you was of, just an outline of how the money was allocated. Let's get a bit granular. The 127 billion shillings allocated to the Health Ministry aims to, among other things, ensure the smooth running of the sector at a time when the nation awaits a shift of the 57-year-old NHIF to SHIF. This coming at a time when the Ministry of Health has been hit by crisis in the recent months. Budgetary allocations have been issued to several areas, including paying of medical interns and others. And Odida with more detail on this.
The 2024-2025 budget has overhauled the healthcare system amid ongoing crises in the sector. Key highlights being increased healthcare funding, while the budget allocates a substantial increase in funds for the healthcare sector aimed at improving service delivery, infrastructure and healthcare workers' welfare.
Towards this end, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of 127 billion to the health sector to support various activities and programs.
In a highly anticipated address, the government has unveiled the 2024 budget, outlining key financial allocations and policy shifts aimed at revitalizing various sectors with a pronounced focus on healthcare. The centerpiece of this year's budget is the phasing out of the National Hospital Insurance Fund (NHIF) to make way for the new Social Health Insurance Fund (SHIF) set to commence on July 1st, 2024.
I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 1.1 billion to strengthen cancer management in Kenyatta National Hospital and Kisii Level 5 hospitals. I have also proposed Kenya shillings 2 billion to the Emergencies, Chronic and Critical Illness Fund.
The past few months, for instance, have seen a critical shortage of vaccines jeopardizing the health of millions of children. Essential vaccines, including those for measles, polio and BCG, have been in short supply, raising public health concerns. The new budget allocates funds specifically to address these shortages.
Throughout the cases of HIV, AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis, and enhance the vaccines and immunization program in the country, I have proposed Kenya shillings 28.7 billion for the Global Fund and Kenya shillings 4.6 billion for vaccines and immunization programs, respectively.
The government's budget estimates address also included measures aimed at resolving the healthcare worker strikes, key proposals being allocating funds to increase salaries and benefits for healthcare workers, as well as investments in better facilities and equipment to improve working environments.
Further, to strengthen the capacity of medical personnel, I have proposed Kenya shillings 3.7 billion for medical interns.
And as the nation awaits the rollout of SHIF, the coming months will be critical in determining the impact of these reforms on the healthcare landscape. And Odida, TV47.
Now, the Kenya Kwanza government is still optimistic regarding the revival of the agriculture sector and ensuring food security among Kenyans. This is despite the challenges that the agriculture sector is facing, emanating from the high cost of production and transporting the products to the market. Professor Njuguna Ndung'u says that the government is ready to respond to challenges in the agriculture sector. This includes aiming at providing adequate and affordable working capital to all farmers through the cooperative societies. Paul Kirobi reports.
The 2024-2025 budget will inevitably make the common mwananchi face difficulties due to the ongoing economic challenges, including the high cost of living and the rising prices of food products. Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, the man of the moment, made his way to the parliament buildings, with many Kenyans expecting him to bring hope to farmers. The hope that efforts will be made to revive the agriculture sector, which is beset with challenges. This, as President William Ruto aims to increase food production by reducing the cost of farm inputs and food production, ensuring farmers can get profit from their produce.
All farmers through cooperative societies, we consider them as aggregators, and deploy the modern agricultural risk management instruments that ensure farming is profitable and incomes are predictable. In addition, it aims to transform farmers from food deficit to surplus producers through input finance, subsidies, and intensive agricultural extension support.
The Treasury has allocated at least 54.6 billion shillings to agriculture. This includes 10 billion shillings for continuing Kenya Kwanza's fertilizer subsidy program, which elicited mixed reactions from Kenyans. Additionally, 647 million shillings is allocated for small-scale irrigation and value addition projects, while 2.5 billion shillings is set aside for emergency locust response. Furthermore, 2.4 billion shillings will finance youth and women in agriculture projects. A significant portion of 6.1 billion shillings will be allocated to the National Agriculture Value Chain Development. Additionally, 642 million shillings will be set aside for the food security and crop diversification project. President William Ruto has committed to ensuring that leather shoes are made in the country, potentially reducing the supply of imported shoes. To support this initiative, he has allocated 300 million shillings for the development of the Leather Industrial Park in Kenani. Another substantial allocation of 1.0 billion shillings will go towards micro, small and medium enterprise agricultural credit. While speaking to farmers and small business people in the agriculture sector, they highlighted transportation of their products to the market as a major challenge. This sector has been significantly affected by this issue.
Hii mizigo ninauza imetoka shambani, kitunguu gunia moja ni 20,000. Wakati tunajaribu kuuza, ukijaribu kuangalia lebo, kuna 5 mbao, kuna 310, inakuwa ni shida sana kutoa zile pesa umetuma kwa shamba. Kwa hivyo unaona uchumi wa nchi uko na shida. Nafaa tuangaliwe zaidi.
Kununulia, ananunua kidogo kidogo. Tuseme mtu anakuja kununua nyanya kwenda kuuza, anunua nyanya ya 100. Mwingine anakuja ananunua 100, mwingine ya 50. Hebu niambie, kabla wewe umenunua hiyo nyanya shilingi 6,000 ama 7,000, kabla hiyo pesa kurudi, hebu niambie.
Kisha 50, hiyo gari imetoa hiyo kasafa kutoka Uganda, tunalipa 170. So ukiangalia hiyo pesa unaona haikutoshi kabisa. Juu uko na watoto, uko na nyumba, uko na nini, huku unakuja na fare.
The issue of food security in the country is now facing a crisis due to the high cost of living. Paul Kirobi, TV47, Nairobi.
The 4 trillion shilling budget estimates, as read by the Treasury CS, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, has elicited mixed reactions from leaders, with some terming it as overambitious and lacking a basis of financing it. As our senior reporter, political reporter for that matter, Elizabeth Mutuku now tells us, this comes amid an uproar on social media, with Kenyans calling on MPs to reject the Finance Bill 2024 in totality over what they say are punitive tax proposals.
After Howard's Treasury CS Professor Njuguna Ndung'u read the budget estimates in the National Assembly, sharing how the national cake will be shared as well as the austerity measures taken to finance the 4 trillion shillings budget.
These are premised on the value chain approach with sectors which will target sectors with the highest impact to drive the economy and sustain economic recovery.
Members of Parliament and other leaders expressed mixed reactions over the financing of 2024-2025 4 trillion budget following the government failure to meet its target on revenue collection in the previous year, urging the Kenya Kwanza government and President William Ruto to consider cutting on expenditure.
Found a budget deficit of close to 7% of GDP. We have brought that down to 3.3%. That means we are managing our expenditure. And what I'm telling you, over the next 3 years, we'll bring that down to 0. And I'm very certain, I'm personally very much committed as a minister in charge of delivery to help the president to ensure that within the next 3 years, we live within our means.
In the House, my mind is very clear that I can only approve something which is beneficial to the public. This finance bill is harmful to the public. Yes, and unless the Committee on Finance brings on board proper amendments to those areas that are injurious The only thing we can do is to reject it.
I want to ask Kenyans also, after the money has been allocated to this project, to be vigilant, so that we are not only vigilant during budget and finance bill, but when it comes to real implementation of development across the counties and across the country, Kenyans are not, they should be vigilant.
The budget reading came amid an uproar from Kenyans on social media, and especially due to Finance Bill 2024, with the majority of MPs confirming that they got unkind words from Kenyans who wanted some proposals which they termed as punitive dropped.
Finance Committee are not going to dance to the tune of many Kenyans saying we reject the finance bill. What are we rejecting in the finance bill? The finance bill is okay. The only thing is that what we now need to do is to try and consider the views of Kenyans.
We are ready to talk to Kenyans, but we'll make the best decisions. They should not send the messages, and other people are taking advantage to extort some of us, to send vulgar messages, raunchy messages, which is not good for us, a member of parliament.
One of the few leaders who received so many messages, and we are going to discuss this budget. We see, because if Kenyans are feeling like this is not the right thing for them at this time, then we need to have a conversation over looking at this budget.
With the reading of budget today, the stage has been set for the Finance Bill 2024, which is expected to be debated next week in National Assembly, with Azimio already saying it is not going to be business as usual. Elizabeth Mutuko, TV47 Pan Buildings, Nairobi.
Now let's have a look at another angle to all this. And the budget proposal of 2024-25 is planning to achieve the set out goals of the government by bringing development to the different sectors within the country. Infrastructure sector will be allocated 100.5 billion shillings. The national grid system getting 27.8 billion, geothermal generation 14 billion, rural electrification 24 billion, mineral resources management and geological survey 1.3 billion, alternative energy technologies 2.2 billion, and finally development of nuclear energy at 920 million shillings.
Mr. Speaker, to scale up production of reliable and affordable energy, I have proposed an allocation of 69.7 billion to the energy subsector. This includes Kenya shillings 27.8 billion for the national grid system, Kenya shillings 24 billion for rural electrification, Kenya shillings 14 billion for the development of geothermal energy, Kenya shillings 2.2 billion for the alternative energy technologies, and Kenya shillings 920 million for the development of nuclear energy.
The 2024-25 proposed budget is hinged on advocating for investment in climate change mitigation, coming against the backdrop of severe droughts and devastating floods that have dented the economy. Treasury CS Professor Njuguna Ndung'u today highlighting the urgent interventions to be taken. Sheila Chelangat with more.
Mitigating the effects of climate change is quite a passionate undertaking for the President William Ruto-led government, quite outstanding in the 2024-2025 budget, whose theme in part advocates for the investment in climate change mitigation. The prolonged 2021 drought and the recently witnessed floods across the country attributed as one of the shocks that pushed the economy to its lowest activity.
The effects of climate change have become detrimental to economies across the globe, with extreme weather conditions, events affecting lives and livelihoods of millions of people.
Hence the call for urgent and decisive interventions in a bid to stop shifts of budgetary resources from economic activity to that of saving lives and property.
Going forward, we shall formulate and implement long-term climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies to generate strong resilience pathways.
Goal to plant 15 billion trees by 2030, as well as the attainment of zero carbon emissions by 2050, is in full swing, all in the hope of restoring a degraded ecosystem.
Mr. Speaker, our climate action agenda is informed by the need to restore our degraded ecosystem that include forests, rivers, and wetlands.
And so the proposal towards environmental protection include allocation of 10.7 billion to forest resources conservation and management and 1.7 billion towards forest research and development. Also 2.7 billion has been set aside for environment management and protection.
5.9 billion for the Kenya Financing Locally Led Climate Action Project, 1.6 billion for meteorological services, and Kenya shillings 13.1 billion for wildlife security, conservation and management.
Also proposed is the allocation of 1.9 billion shillings for water storage and flood control, as well as 17.8 billion for irrigation and land reclamation. Sheila Chelangat for TV47.
For the second year under the Kenya Kwanza regime, pomp and colour dominated the budget statement presentation at Parliament. And uniquely, this year, distinct songs of patriotism by a choir rocked the steps of Treasury buildings that briefly housed the man of the day, Treasury CS, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. Ndung'u's moment of fame with a traditional Treasury briefcase ahead of his 600-metre trip to Parliament building was briefly disrupted by protesters. Moige William has those details.
June 13th will go down in the annals of history as the day the Kenya Kwanza government presented its second budget estimates for the financial year 2024-2025. This man, Njuguna Ndung'u, Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, bore all the burden.
Growth of the economy in the next 2024-2025 is going to remain at around 5.5%, but it is for us to defend it. If we don't put in the policy measures, the programs, the projects, the interventions, then we will fail. All those require resources. Those resources have to come from taxes.
The day was filled with a beehive of activities, and officials from Treasury were all hands on deck to ensure all goes smoothly for the day, including cleaning of the red carpet that Ndung'u will walk on as he gets in the vehicle that will ferry him to Parliament. And as the Cabinet Secretary and others were hauled up in the 14th floor of the Treasury building, polishing budget statements, a choir at the building's entrance was busy with their vocal cords singing patriotic songs. Some minutes after 2 p.m., Ndung'u had the 2024-2025 budget statements packed in the traditional Treasury briefcase, and moments later, the man of the hour at the steps of the Treasury building posed for the cameras before the session was briefly interrupted by protesters, but were quickly whisked away. As per the tradition since the late Mwai Kibaki's presidency, Ndung'u embarked on the now famous German-made Volkswagen Passat registration number GKB 951F, a vehicle introduced by former President Uhuru Kenyatta when he was the finance minister in the year 2009 to symbolize austerity. And under the tight security of heavily armed administration and regular police, Ndung'u and Traj snaked through the Harambee Avenue all the way to the Parliament Road and finally Parliament buildings. Professor Ndung'u was now ready to tell Kenyans how their taxes will be used. Moige William, TV47.
Tonight, a principal magistrate at the Makadara Law Courts in Nairobi is nursing gunshot wounds after she was shot by an armed police officer during a live court proceeding. The magistrate was shot after she made a judgment that did not go down well with her shooter, who was an interested party in an ongoing fraud case. The case involved one woman who was accused to have obtained 2.9 million shillings through false pretense. The woman is said to be in a relationship with a senior police officer who shot and injured the principal magistrate. Our crime beat reporter Franklin Walla was at the crime scene and filed this report.
A senior police officer who was the OCS at Londiani Police Station in Kericho County, Mr. Samson Kipchirchir Kipruto, is the one who shot and injured a principal magistrate at the Makadara Law Courts in Nairobi. The shooting happened moments after the magistrate Monica Kivuti gave a ruling that did not go down well with the accused, as the said police officer Mr. Kipruto is said to have been in a strong relationship with the accused, who was in court today. The officer was present with a Jericho pistol and perhaps on a mission. When the magistrate Monica Kivuti pronounced herself on the matter touching on his close friend, things took a tragic turn. The magistrate gave orders to have Jennifer remanded in prison for absconding appearances severally after she had been released on bond. The said friend was charged for obtaining a sum of 2.9 million shillings through false pretense, and orders to have her remanded triggered the tempers of a trigger-happy Samson Kipruto, who forcefully gained entry into the courtroom using the magistrate's door. The Chief Inspector of Police aimed at the magistrate, firing indiscriminately and injured her on the chest and the pelvic area. The shooting of a magistrate in a live court proceeding is one of the most daring moments ever witnessed in the country. But it becomes even more complex when the shooter is a senior law enforcement officer.
Started running, there was panic. Everyone started panicking, but what we could hear is lie down, lie down. We were all running for our lives.
A situation erupted up in court number 9, whereby one suspect entered to the courts and injured the magistrate in that particular court and the orderlies. But lucky enough, our officers who are within the courts were able to act swiftly, and we managed to neutralize the situation. And now we can say that our magistrates and the officers are stable.
In the ensuing chaos and dramatic shootout, a detective who was present fatally injured Kipruto and ended the reckless shooting. Several other police officers and orderly officers were injured as well. The magistrate was rescued and rushed to hospital where she is recuperating. One female officer is however fighting for her life with a bullet lodged in her left hip.
But we are able to connect the situation between the suspect and the whoever who was involved in the case which was ongoing within the courts. But the details of the same will just come out in due time.
Anyone is aggrieved or is not satisfied with the decision of the court, there are many avenues where they can seek. They can appeal, they can review a decision. So that is not the right way to go.
Following the unfortunate tragic shooting, Chief Justice Martha Koome ordered the closure of Makadara locals until Monday, June 17th for security reinforcement. Matters at the court will be heard virtually, and those requiring physical appearance will be mentioned at Milimani locals. The CJ further noted the importance of enhanced security within the judiciary premises, as he regretted the horrific scenes witnessed at Makadara locals today, adding the aim was to kill the magistrate. Franklin Wala, TV47.
Well, that's about all we had for you this evening. We want to thank you for choosing us to inform you. It is, of course, a pleasure, it's a duty, and it's a privilege to do this. My name is Victor Muyakane. I wish you a good night full of God's blessings, and from all of us, we want to wish you once again a good night.